Hello everybody, Disciple here with Gaming Curios. Now if you guys are into Blizzard games, then you might be just as excited as we are about the release of Destiny 2, and I'm even more excited to announce that we're going to be making Destiny 2 videos as well. To celebrate the launch of the beta and our new channel, we're doing a $300 Battle.net giveaway, where 5 lucky winners will be able to buy Destiny 2 or spend it on just about any other Blizzard title they may play. Check out the link below to enter, it's super easy to get into the giveaway, and we're going to be announcing the winners as soon as it's over on stream. Good luck and enjoy the video. Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. So Overwatch is now a couple of months into its second year since release, but if you go all the way back to October of 2015 when the game was released in beta, it feels like it's been out for quite some time. Now at this point in time, Blizzard has clearly defined what the game is to the studio, how they plan to update the game and continue to provide players with fun and fresh gameplay, and what exactly they hope to bring to the game in the future. But it's also normal for gaming studios to start considering the option of expansions and new content as time goes on. After release, games typically require fewer members on the team to program, create, craft, or test the world that they've released, so it's a logical step in the process to pull some of those developers off and create something new. Developers start to ask, what is it we can do next to continue adding to this world that we've created that isn't just a new content patch? So in this video, we'll discuss whether or not Overwatch could get an expansion or a sequel in the future, and if that were to happen, what exactly an expansion could mean for the game and what it might look like. Now a lot of today's video will be a discussion related to a Q&A session with Jeff Kaplan recently. When asked specifically about the possibility of an expansion, Jeff had quite a bit to say. He starts off the response by saying, "I think an expansion pack or sequel could be cool. I don't know what that is today. We don't have an idea where it's like, oh okay, I totally know what it is." So while they're definitely interested in the concept, it doesn't seem that it's received much thought so far. The main focus at the moment is probably still on producing new maps and polishing the current heroes, maps, and core gameplay systems within the game. He then goes on to explain how he doesn't like the concept of ever adding heroes or maps as a sort of DLC pack for players. He says, "I don't like the idea that some of us can play on this map, or that some of us can't, or some of us can play with these heroes and some of us can't. Since Overwatch has always been a game about switching heroes on the fly, we can safely rule out the idea of adding heroes as future content behind any sort of paywall, and at other times Blizzard has confirmed that heroes and maps will always be free, whether it's through in-game currency or real-world currency. It's a sure thing that all future heroes will be free for everyone. However, many games in the past have pushed DLC map packs. The problem here is that gating players from specific content, especially in a multiplayer focused game like Overwatch, really feels bad. If you have a certain piece of content but your friend doesn't, suddenly you're limited from playing the content you have, and your friend is flat out barred from that content until they unlock it. It also creates a higher barrier to entry for new players who are just getting into a game months or even years after its original release, and they want to keep Overwatch fresh enough that people can keep playing it for years to come. Gating maps also creates a potential problem of segregating matchmaking systems, as Jeff goes on to explain. "I've seen other games do the map thing, but then it creates the two matchmaking pools. It's hard enough to get matchmaking to feel good, it's hard enough to get people to play with their friends when you start to introduce that stuff." So while that certainly writes DLC off the list, Jeff doesn't rule out any sort of expansion or even sequel to the game. Although in this QA session, Jeff goes on to talk about the story-driven Overwatch experience and in-game events such as Junkenstein's Revenge and the Overwatch Uprising, he begins by explaining that since it's a new game engine, there was no core material to work with in terms of simply pathing in AI for an event. Essentially, Junkenstein's Revenge was a test round for exploring PvE encounters for the game, but he also says that the team loves working on these types of events and that the community reception as a whole was positive, especially since I saw everyone loving on those PvE game modes and I played so much of Junkenstein's Revenge. On the flip side though, Jeff expresses concerns in releasing these modes as permanent content, saying that player interest with Uprising in particular had diminished significantly by the 3rd week. While in-game leaderboards help to provide prolonged player interest, imagine if these events actually had real progression tied into them, with meaningful or important unlocks behind them. The the possibility of a well-scripted, never-ending horde mode would definitely make for a mode that many players could enjoy for months to come, and could even encourage people who haven't played Overwatch previously to check out the game simply for the challenge of well-designed PvE gameplay. And that would certainly make for a reasonable expansion for the game. Competitive players wouldn't be barred from anything in play, so you could hop onto any map with any hero that you like, but those interested in learning more about the world of Overwatch, or even just having new and challenging experiences in a PvE environment, could have something to work towards, maybe even with exclusive unlocks like skins, or story-related journal entries or video clips. And it helps Blizzard focus on creating a great PvE game mode experience when you actually put it behind an expansion, so that there's more money flowing in and they can better put a full team on it, as opposed to just adding it as a content patch and stretching the already existing team a little bit thinner. Now, Jeff also mentions the experience the team has with this type of content as well. He says, our lead gameplay programmer Tim Ford worked on the Medal of Honor series, so he made a lot of that type of PvE campaign content. Then you have a bunch of guys who either came from World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft. Jeff Goodman, our lead hero designer, was one of the main encounter designers for World of Warcraft. Scott Mercer, principal designer, was the lead encounter designer on World of Warcraft. So those guys made tons of that PvE, co-op, highly replayable type of content. It's something the team really knows and loves, so I think we'd like to do more of it. In a way, we're just trying to figure out how to do it. With these monthly updates, it's very difficult. Our dev cycles are very fast for something like that, and I think our players deserve a lot more than just a Junkenstein or an Uprising, and trying to figure out how to deliver that to them is a much bigger challenge. Essentially, Jeff ensures us that more is on the way, but that the team wants to make sure the experience is fine-tuned, rewarding, and replayable. If you consider things like World of Warcraft, players grind raids daily for the sake of progression, but Overwatch would need something to fill the void of gear in that instance. Continual grinding of any game mode without reward would be very taxing on players, and it's a big part of why things like Uprising aren't permanent game modes in the game today, since people would eventually stop playing once they got their fill of the PvE experience, which for some people only takes a few days. But Jeff certainly opens the door to speculation, and it definitely seems possible that down the road, the game could release a very thorough PvE experience as an expansion, whether free or paid content. So while it seems possible for future PvE content to be released as an expansion, it's unlikely we would ever see maps or heroes released as such. Furthermore, game modes or modding systems seem out of the question for now as well. Jeff says that he's currently happy with the arcade mode and its ability to provide new experiences, and that the options allowed in custom games provide a ton of variants for players to experiment with. However, outside of that, currently he feels like new game modes would detract from the core experience of Overwatch. He says, I don't believe that many new game modes belong in quick play or competitive. I really think you want the core of the game to feel like the core of the game and not like a circus. And on the topic of modding, Jeff cuts straight to the point. Blizzard isn't opposed to releasing tools like this in the future, but would want them to be well done. He'd rather release something that 99% of the fan base couldn't use because it was so in-depth than to have everybody spewing out, in his own words, crap. He likes the idea of professionals or up-and-coming modders being able to create something truly amazing and unique, but doesn't want the internet overflowing with mediocre content. And with Overwatch being a completely new engine, it's highly likely that any in-depth modding tools would be in the near horizon, as Blizzard is likely still working on that engine internally as well. So there it is, straight from the horse's mouth. Currently, it seems unlikely that we'll see any sort of expansion in the near future, but with enough work, we could potentially even see a sequel to the game that's focused on more of a single-player PvE experience. On the bright side, players can take comfort in knowing no content would ever be paywalled or otherwise cut off from the player base in any way in the current version of Overwatch, and it honestly already feels like a very full game. They'll keep looking to expand upon the current roster of events while also improving them. Additional features in the current events aren't off the table, but it's unlikely we'd see many more added to the selection we currently have, because then events would start to lose their impact. Personally, I'm looking forward to the option to have more in-depth PvE experiences down the road, and I'm interested to see what exactly such an experience and diverse development team could come up with for a future expansion if we were ever to get one. So what do you all think about it? Is a lack of an expansion disheartening as a player, or is the team's dedication to the current game and its polish enough for you to keep coming back day in and day out? Would you like to see the team focus on a different version of the game with the same universe but different game mechanics and potentially a single player based environment, or do you want to see them continuing to work on developing the game that you've been playing since potentially day one? And if we were to see any sort of expansion in the future, what would you like to see in it? Well, while you're here and down in the comments section, why not consider subscribing to our channel and enabling those notifications so you can keep up with all of our newest content. Anyway, I always love it when you guys watch our videos, and thank you so much for sitting through this one. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Peace.